Well, folks, we know that the Pittsburgh Steelers are not going to go undefeated. Washington Redskins 20, Pittsburgh Steelers 17. The Steelers now 11-1. So, celebration goes out to the 1972 Miami Dolphins, of course. Pop the cork, drink the champagne, guzzle it down. The Miami Dolphins of 1972 are still in the record books as the NFL's lone undefeated team in the modern era. Oh, that's right. We're talking college football here at MarkRogersTV, the voice of college football. That's why that voice of college football part comes in. All right. Would love to take your calls tonight at 860-325-3687, 860-325-3687. We've got a new head coach at South Carolina, Shane Beamer. If we have any Gamecock fans out there that would like to chime in. We have, with all the topsy-turvy nature of this 2020 college football season, we've got 4 of the major 5 conferences locked into a conference championship game with 1 week left to play. So that's kind of unfortunate. I would have liked to have seen more drama on the final weekend of the season, but we will not have that. Ohio State, Northwestern, if the Buckeyes play their 6th game, Clemson, Notre Dame, Alabama, Florida, and Oklahoma, Iowa State. Will it be Cincinnati? Would it be USC? Would it be Texas A&M that could break up what we expect the party to be, which is Alabama, Ohio State, Clemson, and Notre Dame. We talked some Notre Dame football today with Nathan Erbach. Be looking out for that video to be released sometime tomorrow. We discussed the difference in Notre Dame football and one Ian Book. I don't know that there's a player in college football, certainly not this year, that I can think of, or even in recent years, who's had a transformation in terms of his persona, perception on the field, of course, than Ian Book. If you would have asked the average college football fan to describe Ian Book before the Clemson game, it would have been, you would have heard terms like game manager, workmanlike quarterback, gets the job done, not necessarily dynamic, just pretty much runs the offense, takes care of the football, wins games. Wins games if he gets the support from the running game and the defense. Now here after the Clemson performance and then some of the plays that he made against North Carolina, especially the flip pass, Ian Book is starting to gain this reputation as this swashbuckling Brett Favre type. And Ian Book, Heisman Trophy, possibly. We got Mac Jones, we got Kyle Trask, Devonta Smith, Justin Fields, and I believe has a shot at the Heisman. Ian Book, Breece Hall, of course, out of Iowa State as well. USC laid a smacking on Washington State 38-13. The game wasn't that close. They led early 35-0. They pretty much put it on cruise control after that. Does anyone believe that USC is really that good? Does anyone believe out there that USC can play with some of the teams that we talk about here every day? We know who those teams are. USC has, after 2 unimpressive performances and victories over Arizona State 28-27, coming back in the final 4 minutes to score 2 touchdowns to win over the Sun Devils, then scoring a couple touchdowns on the final 2 drives to upend a bad Arizona team that USC has started to hit its stride, both sides of the ball the last 2 times out against Utah, winning by 16, and then again last night against the Washington State team that's, man, they'd only played 2 games. But they did play Oregon tough and they did defeat Oregon State. So that Washington State team takes on USC, and the Trojans just blast them. Ross St. Brown had 4 touchdowns in the game. All right. Christmas is coming. Shop Amazon. Use that link in the description section of any of the videos. Go to any of the videos. Grab the Amazon link. Put it somewhere where you know it's going to be, where either you or a significant other can find it readily. It's going to come to mind. You're not going to forget, but grab that Amazon link. Use it when you shop at Amazon, which it's Christmas time. And that helps us build the channel. I was on the phone tonight with Verma Digital. If you own a small business, you probably know, unfortunately, that small businesses have been hit harder than just about any segment of the economy during this COVID time and the shutdowns, whether it was the right thing to do or not. The shutdowns have really hurt small businesses. There's no question about that. Small businesses have been hurt by the shutdown, and the shutdowns in many states, and the shutdowns that are ensuing right now. So we've got some friends at Verma Digital. Talked to them again tonight. They've given me a ton of advice with my small business. See, works right hand in hand. We got 2.6 billion people on Facebook these days, and Verma Digital specializes in social media reach on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube as well. And the folks at Verma Digital, they focus their efforts here in the next year, knowing what's happened to the economy, targeted toward the small business, in working with you, the small business owner. See this guy right here? Yeah, had my session with Verma Digital again tonight. They can certainly point you in the right direction and give you expert advice and direction and implementation, whether it be with Facebook ads, Google AdWords, social media content, or the services of a full-fledged marketing service agency. So Verma Digital, let me get the banner up here, because, and if any of you want to contact me directly to ask me more about what they do, certainly, again, it's a smart move for the small business owner to contact vermadigital.com. You get a free consultation. So keep that in mind, free consultation. And then anything past that, just mention my name, Mark, M-A-R-K, with a K, M-A-R-K. Mention my name, and you qualify for 10% off their services. Mickey, waiting and watching the Big Ten scramble to change the rules and allow Ohio State to play in the conference championship game. Very short-sighted, and it would be the right thing to do. But I would feel bad for Indiana and its fans to be changing rules mid-season. But this is something that wouldn't have been done years ago. But we see where Major League Baseball in particular, not just this season with the pandemic, but in recent seasons, did they not change their playoff system mid-season? Did they not change a few different things in Major League Baseball during the season, which was kind of odd? Phil B, looking forward to, or maybe not so looking forward to, the Florida State-Duke game. Florida State has never lost to Duke. Duke coming off a 48-0 pounding against Miami, and Florida State has not played in forever, and that's not necessarily in the bag. That game is not necessarily in the bag, and of course, we've got our Florida State show coming up Wednesday night at 6 Eastern Time. Wednesday night at 6. Tomorrow night, of course, we get to look through and review and challenge the college football playoff rankings that are unveiled tomorrow night. Tuesday night, Bo, good to see you. Go Clemson. Echo 79, Roll Tide. Joe Bo with the Uncle Lou reference. Cheryl, good to see you as well. The game will be played Saturday as scheduled, noon Eastern time on Fox. Trivia question. Okay, at least in my, not necessarily my lifetime, but in my football fan lifetime, the span of my football watching days, the game has been played at noon every year, except for 1 year. Does anybody know what year that was, that the game was not played at noon? The game's always special, but this one was extra special, and therefore it was moved in terms of game time. Good to see you, Cheryl, as well. Thank you for being the kind and very, very excellent moderator that you are. Mickey B, Browns will hand Pittsburgh their second loss on January 3rd. Okay. The Brownies are what? 9-3? Sean Stapleton, Boomer Sooner. We talked some Oklahoma football today. Be looking out for that, Sean Stapleton. We talked Oklahoma today with Jason Ray. Last word on college football. Give that a listen. Falcon Irks. ACC should never have let Notre Dame play in our conference. Falcon ERX, I would love to know who you root for. Probably a Miami fan. Yeah, I talked some Notre Dame football with Nathan Urbach today. That's going to be released here soon. And I said the same thing that I said when the ACC allowed Notre Dame to play without officially and permanently joining the conference, that I immediately became a Notre Dame fan for the season, a Notre Dame fan wanting them, hoping that they would win the ACC. Ultimate slap in the face. Notre Dame can join the ACC and all the other sports that don't generate money. I know men's basketball generates money. Women's basketball in that conference probably does. It does, but nothing close to football. And for Notre Dame, again, to take the approach and for the ACC to take it, I don't blame Notre Dame. I blame the ACC to be able to, can't imagine the Big Ten and the SEC, especially those two conferences, putting up with that, allowing that, striking that kind of deal to say, we want you in every sport. We want you in football. Oh, you don't want to play football with us? Well, we still... and play us 5 or 6 times a year. That would never happen in those two conferences for sure. I don't know that it would happen in any other conference, period. But the ACC's allowed it to happen. Then they bail out Notre Dame in the 1 year that they could have taken advantage of Notre Dame being left out to dry. Now, could Notre Dame have pieced together a schedule, much like BYU has? It would have been difficult. Consider this is what would have happened. Either the ACC would have said, screw you, because we're giving you the opportunity to play this year and you want the best of both worlds again this year. You get the best of both worlds all the time, but you want it this year as well. Well, we're not going to allow our teams to schedule you non-conference, or else Notre Dame would have put together a non-conference schedule of just playing the entire ACC and then picked up a few other games, but they would have had the entire 14-team ACC to piece together a 10-game schedule or whatever it would have been, plus the rest of the teams in college football. So Notre Dame, I'm sure they would have pieced together a more capable, competent schedule than BYU. They would have. But that was the day that I began to root for Notre Dame for the first time that I can remember ever. Crimson and White 17. Why the 17? Wink, wink. Why the 17? We should count those up. We're going to do that in the off season. Count up the Alabama National Championships. And one of my favorite exercises from last off season, for those of you who were around last off season, was to, of course, run through the seasons where we had, what word am I looking for? Not debated national championships, basically national championships that were disputed. That's the word I'm looking for. disputed national championships. And for me, almost everyone's disputed. So I had a good time going through those. Not a whole lot of people watched them. Got to be careful diving into the historic. A lot of people aren't interested, even though I got a lot of good feedback on those videos. And I see these super chats coming in. I will get to them in just a second. So thank you so much for those. I appreciate that, because you got to keep in mind, everyone, and this is so much appreciated, that this is the full throttle business right here. This is what I do full time, all the time. And therefore, your contributions mean a ton. You can also contribute to Mark Rogers TV at Venmo, PayPal, Cash App. Venmo, PayPal, Cash App. Just search Mark Rogers TV. You should be able to find me there. Bubba Elect. Thank you so much for the super chat contribution. And Bubba Elect, he's got to run, but he paid for a beverage. Very nice. Appreciate that. But Bubba Elect, for enjoying the shows, always enjoying the shows. I have never heard from you. So I just, with 22,000 subscribers and with seeing, I don't know, a few hundred of you, I guess. A few hundred would be my guess on a regular basis. That just, I am sometimes hit with, and it's every couple days, okay, here's the person that watches, and they've been watching a long time, and they can tell me all these things about the channel. So they're not just telling me that they watch, and they don't. They do watch, but I've never heard from them. So I salute all of you who have been watching, whether that be for a week or a month or 6 months or years, and have never commented, never engaged in the conversation. You know, that's all right. It's just fun when we do find out that you exist. But I salute all of you. We dedicate this show to you who watch faithfully, who contribute in many of ways, but we never hear from you. All right. So Bubba Elect, thank you so much. And also we got the comment coming in from Miami Flow. Hey, Mark, keep grinding. ACC messed up with Notre Dame. They did. Watch my video. I see Pigskin Pete in the live chat tonight as well, and he made the same comment today. We were right in line on this one. And really, anybody reasonable that understands business, that understands really self-respect, can say, we don't understand what the ACC did, except for it was a money move, and it was to appease Notre Dame. But this was the perfect opportunity to say, you want to play football in 2020? You want to play a real football schedule in 2020 and be part of the college football playoff discussion and not go piece together a BYU type of schedule? Then you need to sign this little 20-year contract. Miami Flow, again, thank you so much. Yes. And like Pete and I talked about today during our College Football Coast to Coast show, which you can join us each and every Monday at noon Eastern Time, College Football Coast to Coast right here with Pigskin Pete. We also talked about just the scheduling in the ACC, and not just the ACC, but we'll magnify and make an example of the ACC, because we see it in each conference, because we've got 3 conferences with 14 teams. We've got a 12-team conference. We've got a 10-team Big 12. So really the Big 12 does it right. And I'm talking about the normal season. The Big 12 does it right. Now, are they so genius that they do it right? No. Basically, they had teams, programs leave the conference, and by default, they now do it right. In that, everybody plays everyone. They play the truest championship. The Pac-12 would be next, where they play a 9-game schedule, 12 teams. So think about it. You're only missing 2 opponents, 2 potential opponents in the Pac-12. And then the Big Ten plays 9 games. That's one better than the ACC and the SEC against a 14-team league. So in the Big Ten, any particular team is playing 8 other teams, and they miss 4. In the ACC and the SEC, you've got a huge disparity of strength of schedule, because you've got 14 teams playing 8-game conference schedules. Therefore, you're missing 5 teams. I bring that back to the situation involving. So this happens every year where key games are not being played in all the major conferences except the Big 12. But it's really magnified this year with Notre Dame and Miami because the Canes have one loss and Notre Dame has 0 losses, and Clemson has the 1 loss to Notre Dame. Therefore, we've got a tiebreaker between just Clemson and Miami. Miami did not have its opportunity to play Notre Dame and possibly defeat the Irish and create some chaos, create a tiebreaker between the 3. But Notre Dame has played well, and I have no issue with them in the ACC championship game. And other teams are missing games against other contenders. But that's the one obvious miss on the schedule. Speaking of people I've never seen before, the Man 89 Tough One. Welcome to Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. It appears, I'm guessing, you're an Ohio State fan. Would love to see Maryland play Ohio State, but I'd say it's unlikely. Yeah, the thought this week, and again, we're going to release this video tomorrow with Pat Murphy from Bucknuts, is that if Ohio State is not able to play Michigan, or I should say it the other way around, because Michigan would be the team most likely that's going to bow out of that game, what does the Big Ten do with Ohio State trying to find a game for them? And really, the one most likely opportunity is that Minnesota hasn't played 2 consecutive weeks. And they're scheduled to play Nebraska. So if Minnesota's still having COVID issues, then that releases Nebraska to be played. Does that really help Ohio State? Well, technically it does. It would get them a 6th game, but they've already played Nebraska. Nebraska is one of the worst teams in the Big Ten, at least through this small sample size of 6 games. And it would be the odd occurrence of 2 teams not even in the same division playing twice in the same season. Got Terry Handley on the line. Go Canes. Great show, Mark. Thank you, Terry. Appreciate your contribution as well. Thank you so much. Cincinnati plays Tulsa this weekend. They play Tulsa again the next weekend in the conference championship game. For the 2nd consecutive year, the American Conference is pitting 2 teams against each other that will then play in the conference championship game. So Cincinnati has an opportunity to play really 1, but 2 games against a quality team to finish 10-0. I will take this call, and then I will tell you what I'm rooting for.
Press 1 to start the call, or the call will start at the beep.
Hey, it's Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Who's on the line?
The man that gives college football its voice, Mark Rogers. Hi, and how are you, sir?
I'm doing just fine, Dave. Can I expect that greeting each and every time now?
You like it? I can continue if that's okay with you.
I appreciate that you gave it some just a little bit of thought, and you're delivering it. So go right ahead.
Hey, Mark, I think it's got a nice ring to it. What do you want me to say? I wanted to start by saying, hey, I listened to you on Pigskin Pete today. Just a couple observations. I heard that you're talking about the possibilities of another opponent for Ohio State this weekend. And one of the things I wanted to kind of get to, first of all, I think that, by and large, I want Ohio State to play as many games as possible, just first and foremost. Because the one thing I've got to say is this is where, and the other conferences are saying, how's it fair that Ohio State only plays a certain amount of games, and then the ACC and the SEC get to play that many more games, and, they're already, ahead of the game and in the playoff. As an Ohio State fan, believe you me, I want to play more football games because I only think that's going to help us. Because remember 2007, 2014, Mark, we really didn't catch our stride until later in the year, as the season moved along that year. And I certainly think by playing more games, that would help us play younger players, work on our scheme, work on our defense. So, I'm all about playing more football games, but as I said to you before, we're at where we're at. I missed it. I heard you suggest Nebraska. Was there another opponent other than Nebraska you suggested, obviously, other than the team up north that we could play?
Well, the Nebraska conversation was only due to the fact that Minnesota's missed 2 consecutive weeks and they're scheduled to play Nebraska. So if the Golden Gophers cannot go, then that frees up Nebraska. Not that that would be a good opponent or a game that people would want to see, but that would be, just based on that little bit of logic, the most likely option.
Was Maryland also a possibility, Mark, or is that not out there as a possibility?
So we cut a segment today with Pat Murphy from Bucknuts. He had also said that, and he didn't give credibility to this as being coming from an official status, but that it's been kicked around some circles in the media that maybe the Big Ten would, we see quite a bit of scheduling flexibility across college football in recent weeks, that maybe the Big Ten moves 4 teams around to give Ohio State a different opponent if it doesn't adversely affect the other 3 teams.
Right. Well, the one thing I would say is to get back Maryland, because remember, Maryland was the one that canceled. So, if we could, that would just basically be rescheduling that game. So, in a lot of ways, that would make sense, other than maybe playing Nebraska twice.
Yeah.
So, I think in the end, I think that would probably be a little bit more ideal of a situation as far as that. It's not an ideal situation, but I think more ideal than playing Nebraska, let's say, for a second time. Are you? I didn't hear your Pat Murphy segment. Was he optimistic that they might change the rule, and are you optimistic that they may change it?
Well, I have not posted the video yet. That's why you didn't see it. But
okay.
We'll do that first thing in the morning. But he was not necessarily. I don't know that he'd lean one way or the other. We just talked about that it is in fact being talked about. And that I don't think that the College Football Playoff Selection Committee, if the further we go along in this process of the playoff from year to year to year, the less they, not that they're not honoring conference championships, because we've still only had 2 teams make it without winning a conference. Well, Notre Dame, technically 3 teams. But it seems like that's less of the talk now than it was originally the first couple years. They lean heavily more on, we're just ranking teams, more or less, that they all could be just in a bucket aside from conference affiliation. And, if they all 4 come from the same conference, they come from the same conference. We just select the 4 best teams based on a combination of resume and the eye test. And therefore, Ohio State going to play what would be the Wisconsin-Iowa winner, which that would be an intriguing game, maybe even more so than Northwestern, probably satisfies the committee just as much as them playing Northwestern.
Yeah, I would say that I was a little bit higher on Wisconsin earlier in the year and a little bit more impressed with their offense, certainly earlier in the year, and thought they would put more than 6 points on the board, last week. That's why I played them in that game. Good call on your part, by the way, with Indiana, Mark.
Yeah, it's one of the few.
So, not a great week for Mark Rogers on the predictions. Huh?
No, I'm hanging on just a few games over 500, unfortunately, man. Oh, my goodness.
Yeah. Hey, Mark, by the way, one last note on the Ohio State thing. I think Barry Alvarez chiming in, with the kind of clout he has, because he helped to put together the schedule, by the way. I think kind of having him in his corner, Ohio State's corner, I think could be big, real big, I think. What do you think?
Well, yeah, he holds as much respect as anybody in that conference from being, of course, a very successful coach, athletic director, and just being a guy that has been in the conference for so long. Sure, absolutely.
I think so. Hey, Mark, what's the Alabama LSU? Did you watch much of the Alabama LSU game, by the way?
I don't know. I saw maybe 15 or 20 plays.
So stop being competitive, I take it, right?
I actually didn't start with that game. I'm constantly, once 3 o'clock hits on a Saturday, I am jumping around, basically shooting segments, trying to DVR games at the same time, run back, watch as much as I can, and just back and forth. And with Alabama, LSU, whomever else was playing at the time, I was just more into that game. I think Clemson was getting challenged more than Alabama. So by the time I got to some of that, yeah, I just didn't see a whole lot.
A couple quick observations. I do think Alabama's defense has gotten a lot better. I think that's one of the benefits of them playing more games. It's only allowed them to play other players and get a rotation down and just improve. That's the one thing I was thinking about Ohio State. It would certainly help us if we could play more games to hopefully get a little bit more improvement on that side of the ball. No doubt about it. There's something like game experience. By the way, Mark, the quarterback for LSU, did he remind you at all of Jamarcus Russell? I got a little bit of a Jamarcus Russell feel from him. What were your thoughts?
From a talent standpoint, or just from a size standpoint, I can see that.
Yeah, maybe arm too.
Yeah. Yeah, I really can't say that I really noticed that kind of arm talent. And people out there that are hearing the name Jamarcus Russell need to realize that he's become a bit of a joke in the aftermath of his bust status in the NFL. But there was a reason that he was the number 1 player taken in the draft, that he was just that good in college. And not so much just that good in terms of production, but showed the NFL talent that people placed him in that type of regard. Yeah, I don't think TJ Finley's in that realm.
Yeah, the one thing I will say is I think Russell really got drafted that high for tearing up a really bad Notre Dame defense in that Sugar Bowl against Brady Quinn. So,
I've certainly.
And that was at a time.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Dave. I was just going to say I've certainly heard other people make the same statement, of which my thought is that I would hope and believe that NFL front office personnel is more advanced and sophisticated than that. But you're not the first person to say that, so you might be right.
Hey, Mark, one thing I wanted to talk to you on Saturday we didn't get to was, and you got to it on Picks and Pete. We talked a little bit about it on Saturday, was advancing the 8-team scenario in the playoff, which I know you're an advocate for. Just a couple of things, and I mentioned these to Pete. I didn't quite get a chance to mention them to you on Saturday, so let me run them by you.
Sure.
Number one, I had said to Pete, first and foremost, that the bowl games have obviously become more diminished over the years. Even the major bowl games, the Rose, the Sugar, the Orange, even the major bowl games. And the one thing I will say, I think that, actually, I heard this years ago from the late Keith Jackson, who proposed that really with the 4 major bowl games, you basically have the quarterfinals already set up, right? Because you could take the Rose, the Orange, the Sugar, Fiesta, or Cotton, whatever you consider the 4th major bowl game, and utilize those as quarterfinals, correct?
You can. Continue your point, and then I'll start running down the first issue I have with that. But keep going.
Okay. All right. Well, first of all, I do think that, and to your point that you made on Pete's show about the conference championships mattering, and I remember you equating that to basically the division titles in the NFL. And I can see where you're coming from on that, and I actually have some agreement with you on that. I do think that, conference representation and winning your conference, I mean, if we consider you a major, Power 5 conference, and I know not all Power 5 conferences are created equal. However, I do think that who's to say that, USC or one of the, they look like the best team in the Pac-12 right now, but maybe by the end of the year they play some more games, but they couldn't compete depending on who their draw was in the playoff. That being said, I think that basically you always had the issue with playoff, bottom line, 4 representatives, and you had 5 major conferences. So basically with an 18 playoff, you do take care of the 5 major conferences because that's 5 bids right there. You can also accommodate a Power 5 team, which a lot of people have complained, why doesn't a Power 5 team get a shot? So there's your 6th seed. Mm-hmm. And then usually, in a lot of years, there are 2 at least at-large strong teams. Usually the second-place team, there's a lot of times the second-place team in the SEC is a 2-loss team, a very strong 2-loss team, like Georgia was in 18. 18 Georgia was a fairly strong 2-loss team. So, you know, there's your 7th seed, and I'm sure Big 12, ACC possibly, but more likely, let's say Big 12, probably Big 10, you could probably find a decent 8th seed. So there's your 8 seeds. And I think in a lot of ways, you have the 4 major bowl games. There's your setup. Your thoughts?
So my first thought concerning the 4 major bowl games being used as playoff games, the issue I have with that is that there is tradition surrounding these bowl games, and that tradition was torn down starting with the BCS championship game, because then the BCS championship game, before it was separated to just a BCS championship game, was being used as one of the games. So there's a conference and regional flair to each game. The rose, the cotton, the sugar, the orange. So for us old diehard fans, there's a regional flair, a conference affiliation. And without that, then you might as well just call them why. The Rose Bowl is special because it's the Pac-12 champion taking on the Big Ten champion. The SEC connection to the Sugar Bowl, the Big 12 connection at one point to the Orange Bowl, etc. But once you strip that away, why is it the Rose Bowl? Why is it the Cotton Bowl? Why is it the Sugar Bowl? It's just a game in a stadium in a city to me. And if any team from any conference can play in it, to me, they're just semifinal 1, semifinal 2. You know, it just sounds nice and maintains that little thread of tradition to call it the Peach Bowl, the Cotton Bowl, the Rose Bowl, whatever. The Rose Bowl to me is not the Rose Bowl when you got Florida State and, well, I was going to say Oregon. Of course, they represent the Pac-12, but we could come up with other examples of 2 teams playing in the Rose Bowl that have no affiliation with the Pac-12 or the Big Ten. So big deal. It's played in the Rose Bowl stadium.
Right.
And on and on and on. I don't care for that myself. So call it what you will. We'll get to the nuts and bolts of the actual playoff system. So I will, at some point in the offseason, I promise to do this because I will have fun doing this. I will go through each college football season, and I will just keep going back and back, further and further and further and further. Who knows when I'll stop. And I will devise an 18 playoff for every college football season that's been played from 2020 going backward. And we'll see what that 18 playoff looks like with that format in play. The 5 teams from the champion, the 5 champions, and then the wild cards. And then I think I'm not going to promise this because this is going to be pretty extensive as well. I would like to see what a 16-team playoff with a group of 5 included would look like. I think that's
too much, Mark.
With the group of 5 included.
Okay.
Well, I think it's too much too, but I think one of 2 things, ideally one of 2 things has to happen. We either need to have an 8-team playoff with the Power 5, or we should really, if we're going to respect the group of 5, we're going to, under that 8-team format, we're going to let them go play their own championship. Or we're going to include their conference champions too, and let's play 16 teams. Do you like the college basketball tournament, March Madness?
I'm a fan of March Madness, and you know, I get where you're going with this. One point I was going to make about expanded play, like I've got to ask you this question, though, Mark, because I asked
Yeah.
and Joel Klatt put it out there, and it totally makes sense. And I believe we've talked about this before, but do you know the concern about expanding the playoff is? We basically had, what have we had? How many semifinal games? We've had 12 semifinal games, correct, Mark?
Yes.
We've had 3 competitive games. 3 competitive. My Buckeyes were in 2 of them, of course. We've had 3 competitive games out of 12 semifinals. And the thought process is that if we expand it, we continue to only expand more blowouts. Because basically we're at a point right now where the playoff, in a lot of ways, and Klatt made this point, I think it's obviously a very good one, which is basically the talent is being cycled through to about 3 or 4 programs right now. And the playoff has wrought us that. And what I was saying as far as that goes is that's where, in some ways, the playoff, because, and you maybe have done analysis on this, Mark, it seemed to me when college football was during the BCS era, and certainly before the BCS era, when college football was a little bit more regionalized, it seemed to be more competitive. I used to see a lot more, let's say, 15 beat number 6, or 16 beat number 7, or those type of wins weren't so far out of the question. It seems like, and I don't know if you trace during the playoff era how likely it is, let's say, the top 20 beats, let's say the top 2 or 3, compared to how it was, let's say, 10, 15 years ago, when it didn't seem like the gap was this far as it is right now. Have you noticed that?
So,
am I on to something as far as that?
Well, you might be. I don't have any metrics, or I've not run the analysis to, and I have not thought of it that way in terms of looking at, okay, let's look at the rankings, and as you just pointed out, let's see how often, what the winning percentage is between a top 5 team versus a top 25 team that's in that 20 to 25 range, and let's see if that was a more competitive game 25 years ago than it is now. It would be my guess that you're onto something, and that's correct, but I don't know that. What I do know is that if you look, as you well know, at college football, let's just take the 80s and 90s. Let's go 1980 to 95, those 15 years, that if you look at every conference, let's look at the Big Ten. Who plays for national championships in the Big Ten? Ohio State, period. They're the only team. Penn State is on that outer discussion and has been. Michigan was supposed to be, but they never fulfill it. So basically, Ohio State. Between 1980 and 95, how many teams in the Big Ten had some semblance of a shot at a national championship late in the season? Illinois did, Iowa did, Ohio State did, Michigan did.
Penn State did 94, Mark.
Sure, Penn State did. And even the year before, they finished in the top 10. So you had more teams that were competitive. And I noticed this, or it brought it back to life, when I was doing that series where I was taking apart disputed national championships. And I was going through 1983 and 84 and 90 and 91, and I was breaking it down and looking at the conference races and who was finishing in the before the bowl games, who was competing and who was in the mix. And I was seeing all these teams, thinking these teams would never come close. Iowa, Illinois, competing for national championships late in the season, and looking at Arizona and Arizona State and UCLA and all these schools that had a hand in national title contention late in November, and just thinking, this doesn't happen now.
Sure. Well, the one thing I must say, Mark, and you talked about this with Steve Days, the Big Ten, and you talked about this, I think, once with me, in the 80s, the 90s, and even into the early 2000s, and I think you mentioned you even wrote papers about this, the Big Ten was a lot closer to the SEC, in a lot of years, maybe even better than the SEC in that time frame. Let's say in the 80s, especially into the 90s, when they added Penn State, when Penn State was really Penn State, and Wisconsin started to come up under Barry Alvarez, the Big Ten was really good in the 90s. I never heard anybody say in the 90s, boy, that Big Ten is a sorry conference. I mean, people understood that the Big Ten was really good. And, you know, as we talked about, it's all tied to that. To be fair, and I hate to say this as an Ohio State fan, it really started in that 06 period when the SEC completely took over and went on that 7-year run, and we really saw the seismic shift. So I just think that what the playoff era has done, because again, now I'm a fan of one of the 3 or 4 teams that obviously gets that talent, so I can't really be too upset about it. However, watching college football as long as I've noticed it's now centralizing around those 3 to 4 teams a lot more than it ever has. It's just an observation. I know you do a lot of the analysis. It's just something I've noticed over the years. And the one thing about the expansion of the playoff market, I just wonder if it gets us to a better place as far as getting better quarterfinal games, better semifinal games, you know, just better games overall. I mean, that's my concern just going forward. I don't know if that's yours, but that would be mine.
And I understand that based on what we've seen. Yeah, it only makes sense that if you add teams that are so teams 5 through 8, the assumption is that they're not as good as teams 1 through 4. Now, I think in some years that there's no distinguishing between, let's say, team 4, 5, and 6. But yes, 1 through 4 is better than 5 through 8 in any year. That's why they're ranked there. They've earned it to a certain extent. So that logic leads us to forecast blowouts. I see that. I'm just trying to create a system that's more objective than people deciding in a room who should go to the playoff and leaving out a conference. And, you know, Pigskin said it the other night when we were debating about the 8 teams. And, you know, he may be right in forecasting this. So I'm not picking on him at all, because he would probably have more people in his corner than I would have in mine when he said, who wants to see the Pac-12 champion lose by 80 points this year?
Sure.
Well, yeah. We didn't have any issue with Oklahoma being selected last year and losing by 5 touchdowns at halftime. And when we look at the Pac-12, I'm not seeing the horrendous play. Like, I'm seeing the Pac-12 selected twice in the span of 6 years for a playoff. And I'm seeing a Washington team that was not severely competitive with Alabama, but the game was 24-7. It was 17-7 in the fourth quarter. And one of those Alabama touchdowns was a scoop and score. It was a pretty defensive struggle in which Washington was in the game. Alabama was clearly the better team, but they were the number 1 team in the country. So that's our last example of Pac-12 football, is that even Washington, who was probably at that point in the season not even the best team in the Pac-12, because they lost by 2 scores to USC, the USC team that beat Penn State in the Rose Bowl, that the Pac-12 may have sent its second best team to the college football playoff, and they weren't embarrassed. It wasn't a great game, but they weren't embarrassed. And then our only other example of the Pac-12 is, of course, as you well know, Oregon beating Florida State by 39, then losing to a great Ohio State team in the championship game. And that's what we've got from the Pac-12. I don't find that too embarrassing.
Right. Last couple things, Mark, before I let you go. Bottom line, you still think that the playoff is better than the BCS, right?
Yes.
Okay.
For one simple reason.
Go ahead.
It affords 2 other worthy teams an opportunity to play for the national championship.
Right. I bet if we went back and looked at it, Mark, and I know there were a lot of years they got it wrong with the BCS, but I bet they got it right. I bet they got it right more years from 98 to 2013 than they got it wrong.
Oh, you don't want to get me started on that, Dave.
We can examine it one time. I mean, we don't have the time now, but I'd be willing to take a look at it. I think they got it right more. I mean, because it was at 15, 16 years of sample size. I bet you they got it right at least 9 out of those times.
Well, let me put it this way. I'm not disagreeing with your statement that I am disagreeing with your statement that that they clearly got it right. I can't state that they clearly got it wrong. What I will state is that most of those years, there were teams or a team left out that had just as much resume or just as much of a right to play in that game as one of the teams that played in the game. That's what I will state. Not necessarily that they got it wrong, but that there were other worthy teams that didn't get an opportunity.
Right. Last thing, and I'll let you go. Within the next 2-3 years, do we see expansion?
Do you want my hope or my guess? My guess is going to say in the next few years. I don't think so.
Well, you think it's going to take a long time then, right?
I think it's going to take, I don't know what the current contracts are with my former employer, but I did at one time know, and I'm sure somebody can jump on here. I'm sure we can easily Google it, but it's a pretty extensive contract. Not that contracts can't be altered, but I think it's a pretty long-standing contract before they will really look at it, I think.
Right. Well, it'll be interesting to take a look in the years to come, Mark. Just wanted to go over that with you. Always a pleasure, my friend.
Absolutely. Thanks, Dave.
Take care now. Bye-bye.
You too. It's our guy, Dave Greenshield, bringing it, as he always does, with some historical perspective and thought process to college football. Love the conversation. Sean is telling us that it looks like the Pac-12 will be the first conference to break up. The Pac-12, from everything I gather, has certainly been the conference that has been hit hardest financially by this pandemic. MarkRogersTV, the voice of college football, who's on the line?
Hey, Mr. Mark Rogers, it's Ballard Sports Media. How you doing tonight, sir?
Ballard, I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing pretty well. Kind of what that last caller just got through saying before he hung up. I kind of wanted to call and talk to you about this. I'm thinking about, making a video and talking about this topic, but I just wanted to let you know, or not let you know, but wanted to get your opinions, I should say. With all the teams this year, obviously we got teams like Coastal Carolina and BYU, all these like group of five teams. But like even outside of that, in like the Power Five, you got teams like Indiana. You got a one-loss A&M. You got a one-loss Florida, Ohio State, and so on. You get all the teams. But do you think that, if it all plays out in a certain scenario on championship weekend, could this be the year that like breaks the playoff committee to where like I know there's protocol and everything, but could it be that kind of year where it's like, super tough to pick the four teams, or like not like all the four teams, because like obviously you'll have winners in the championships and everything, but like fighting for the fourth spot, if there's quite a few teams with good enough resumes and it's like it's so hard for that final spot, could this be the year that kind of breaks the committee and says, you know what, we might have to expand? Like what would it take this year? Do you think? I think you get what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I do. That it's just beyond a fifth team saying we're worthy and we've produced a similar resume to team number 4. So, we're really hurting one program or one team versus what you're saying is there's like 9 teams lined up. We can only select 4 and there's another 5. I'm stretching it a little bit far. But give me your worst case scenario, or in my opinion, it's the best case scenario because it debunks the system and proves it to be a farce. But in a reasonable way, give me a mess of a situation.
So like for example, you got already set Bama and Florida for the SEC title game. You
Sure.
still got only a one-loss A&M team there are only one losses to the number one team, the best team in the country this year, Alabama.
Sure. So just run through the
Guys,
conferences real quick and just give me what happens to make it a mess.
Well, I was trying to get to that. Like some of the teams that are kind of on the outside looking in, like you have a one-loss A&M, you have the ACC with Notre Dame and Clemson. You know, as far as like that set, you know, let's say, for example, Clemson beats Notre Dame, ACC rematch in the title game, and it's close. You got a one-loss Notre Dame team. They've been good all year. They've proven it.
Sure. So we've got, not to cut you off, Ballard, I'm just trying to get us set up with this scenario. So you got 5 one-loss teams in the ACC and the SEC. Florida, Texas A&M, Alabama, Clemson, Notre Dame all have 1 loss.
Yeah, you also got Miami in there too from the ACC.
Yeah. Okay, 6 teams with 1 loss. Okay, what happens in the Big Ten?
You got a one-loss Northwestern team. You got a 5-0, at least current 5-0 Ohio State team. You got a 6-1 right now Indiana team, who's won, by the way. Probably could have, should have, would have won this game. They were really, really close. Indiana.
So again, to cut to the chase, let's say you got Northwestern beats Ohio State in the Big Ten championship game, and Indiana wins their seeded game against whoever, Iowa or somebody. So you got 3 one-loss teams in the Big Ten: Northwestern, Ohio State, and Indiana. Yep, that can happen.
Yes, sir.
So we're up to 9 one-loss teams, and we haven't even, obviously, the Big 12, everybody's got 2 losses, so that's what it is. And then we go out to the Pac-12,
Right.
and probably to I'm not trying to lead you in a certain direction. I'm just trying to get us set up with this scenario. Actually, it would be a better argument probably if there's an undefeated team in the Pac-12. Well, you know what?
Right.
You know what's funny that could happen,
right
Ballard, is that USC and Colorado haven't played. They're not supposed to play. So you could have 2 undefeated teams in the Pac-12 because they didn't play each other, which is ridiculous.
USC right now is 16 in the rankings, which is pretty good for USC. They've only played 3 games, but they are undefeated right now. And again, they only got like 6 or 7 in total, whatever. But yeah, I mean, you could have an undefeated Pac-12 team. And again, like you mentioned, Colorado as well, who's sitting there at 4-0. So, I mean, there's just a lot of not only undefeated teams or whatever, you got Power 5, not like Group of 5, Power 5 teams with either only 1 loss right there for a championship. And you also have undefeated teams, again, like we mentioned, USC and Colorado in the Pac-12. So there's quite a few teams that could have a really good shot at like the 4th spot in the playoffs. And it's already a weird year, but you imagine what it's probably going to be like in that committee room if a lot of craziness goes down and all these teams right there.
Yeah, a lot would have to happen here, but this isn't crazy what you just suggested. So we've got Colorado, USC, Cincinnati, and Coastal Carolina are undefeated. So we've got 4 undefeated teams, and one of them, Coastal Carolina, is not going to be considered, but we still have 4 undefeated teams. Then we've got 9 one-loss teams: Indiana, Ohio State, Northwestern, Miami, Florida, Texas A&M, Alabama, Clemson, and Notre Dame.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's a lot of teams.
You know what they're still going to come down to? They're basically going to select, unless some of those conference championship games are blowouts. You know what that's all going to come down to? Them deciding whether they're going to select, well, you know, maybe Ohio State doesn't go. They got a loss. It's probably they'll come up with some kind of, wow, maybe they just bring us down to 2 conferences and it's an SEC and ACC. Yeah, it's crazy. That would be great. I would love that scenario. I would love that scenario.
Mark, my head is at the thought of this.
I love it.
It's crazy. I mean, it's awesome that, like, to see, that's what it makes it so great is just the controversy for some of these. Like, and we've seen it in a normal season, but with it being a COVID year, and you also got to consider all the opt-outs and everything to go alongside that. I think, if I'm not mistaken, they are including that this year, obviously. But, like, it's a weird year. It's not like it's super obvious this year. I mean, there's a lot that could happen between now and, I guess, Selection Day is late December this month. So, but
Yeah, I love that scenario.
there's things that
So your original
Yes, sir.
question
Well,
would be whether they would blow up the committee, or whether they would go to 8 teams based on this 1 year.
right.
Well,
Yeah, I mean, I would not be against at least experimenting and giving it a shot for like 1 year or so just to see how it works. But I know that there's money and stuff into all that, I think, right? Like, you know, they can't just expand, I don't think.
well, the more
Did
games, the more money. So that's not the problem. The more games they play, the more money they make by far.
Mhm.
So nobody's going to be hurting, whether it be the conferences or the TV networks, ESPN in particular, if they play more games. They're all for that.
Yeah.
They play more games, they make more money. Yeah, and for those people that say you'd have to reduce the regular season, okay, if we had, I don't know that my mind can handle the overload, but basically what's going on here, if you go with 8 teams, is you only have 4 additional teams out of 130 playing 1 more game, and you basically have a couple more teams playing 2 more games. Yeah, there's very few more games being played. There's like 7 more games being played of college football.
Right. And would that be, I guess that would be pushing back when they play the championship, because you'd have to have time for all that plus all the other bowl games.
Well,
Just to fit it in between, like, I guess, like quarterfinals is what they would call it, and then semifinals, and then the natty and everything.
well, as it stands right now, the conference championship games are typically played, December 3rd, 4th, or 5th, something like that. And then there's there's roughly more than 3 weeks to a New Year's Eve, the 29th, the 30th, something in that range, where we play the semifinals. They could play the quarterfinals on like the 20th or 22nd. They'd still have 15, 16, 17 days to prepare.
Yeah, that would work. Yeah, I guess, as far as timing and everything. But yeah, it's just, I mean, there's a lot of, I think a lot of teams that look really good this year, deserving to make the playoffs. But again, at least for this year, there can only be 4 teams, and I appreciate you taking my call, Mark, and appreciate what you do. Happy holidays, and from a Bama fan, roll Tide.
Appreciate that, Ballard. Good luck on your video.
Thank you.
All right, our guy, Ballard Sports Media. I'm going to have to check out his channel sometime. But he comes on here with some good comments, so please check him out. Ballard Sports Media. All right, somebody's asked me, Clemson Savage, Mark, Texas, next head coach. Well, Texas fans wanted to be Urban Meyer, and I understand why. Will Urban Meyer be the next head coach at Texas? So it's Urban Meyer, or we start thinking about who could possibly go to Texas. Of course, the first name I'm thinking of is Matt Campbell. Anybody else have any good names going to Texas? Going to Texas. Mario Cristobal, Matt Campbell. I would have thought a few years ago Gary Patterson would be a good selection. I don't know if he's, we had this conversation the other day, if he's kind of reached that that zenith and coming down the other side. Not that he's not still an excellent head coach, but I don't know if he still has it in him to build up a program like that. But I always liked Gary Patterson. When you start talking about some of these programs like a Texas, there's a certain culture there that I don't think is very neutral. It's very extreme, that you have to understand what you're getting into when it comes to boosters and administration and alumni. I've heard a lot of bad things about, and a lot of extreme things about the way business is handled at the University of Texas. So it's very political, a lot of money, a lot of resources, great recruiting base, and we've got our buddy Steve Helwick, who comes on here on a regular basis, who defends Texas and that Tom Herman's succeeding. And that's, of course, a bit ridiculous. They're not succeeding. All right, so every night at 9 o'clock Eastern Time, we take your calls right here at Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football, and we are committed to doing that through the college football season every night, Monday through Friday. We will miss a few nights here and there. We will miss a few. The holidays are coming. I want to get the Christmas tree up, which the Christmas tree usually adorns the background, the backdrop here somewhere, although I'm situated much differently than I was at this time last year, but we'll figure it out because we got to get festive around here, so we'll do that. Also, keep in mind that we've got our exclusive live streams here, our team-specific live streams. So you got Ohio State and Florida State in the SEC coming up on Wednesday night. That's Ohio State at 2, Florida State at 6 Eastern, and the SEC at 8 Eastern. And then coming up on Thursday, Nebraska Live at 6 o'clock Eastern, and we'll keep you updated on when we're going to bring you our Miami Live show with the Hurricanes off this week. Do they play? Yes, Miami, North Carolina. Sorry, Miami, North Carolina this week. Can't wait to see that game. That probably outside of tradition-rich stuff like Ohio State, Michigan, USC, UCLA that I'm a sucker for, just in regards to seeing two teams on the same field. I'm interested to see Miami and North Carolina. I would think our guy Luke Walker can't wait to see North Carolina, Miami. Of course, the Heels beat them last year on a 4th and 25 conversion, 4th and 19. Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Who's on the line?
Hey, Mark, it's Dominic.
Hey, Dominic. How are you?
I'm doing all right. How
Good.
about you?
I'm good. What you got going on tonight?
Oh, nothing much, really. Today I was just doing some stuff around the house. Had to get my schoolwork done because basically the weekend it's Monday, so I got that out of the way.
Okay.
For today.
Well done.
Yeah, but I really want to keep track on college football because I found out doing that recently, so I apologize.
No apologies needed. No, not necessary. You take care of your life. That's most important.
Yes. Yeah, I know. But, I actually want to talk about the playoffs coming up soon.
Sure.
So, let me just get the standings up. Let me take a look. Alrighty. Alright, I got the, okay, which one was I gonna check? Oh, yeah, I was checking out on the Big Ten conference. So Ohio State is at the top of the East on 5-0, and they seem pretty good in the Big Ten. I'm pretty sure they can make the playoffs. But aside from that, the Northwestern Wildcats. Oh man, I'm not sure for the Northwestern Wildcats. 5-1 might be. They seem very, very well in these two teams in the Big Ten. Okay. Alrighty. Oh, wait a minute.
So what point are we going to get to here, Dominic? What are we looking for here?
The playoffs.
Okay, the playoffs.
Sorry about
yes.
that.
So what about the playoffs?
The Big Ten
Yes.
part, like
who could make the playoffs in the Big Ten?
Yes.
Well, Ohio State's undefeated. Most people expect them to win their last two games and finish undefeated and probably make the playoffs. Other than that, you've got Northwestern will play in the Big Ten championship game, and they've got one loss, but still probably have very little chance of getting into the playoff, and Indiana would be in the same boat. Those teams have very, very small chances to get to the playoff, but they do only have one loss, so it's possible they could get some consideration, especially Indiana.
Yes. Indiana. They've done pretty well throughout the season. So to the point of that, now to the other one, the Big 12.
No teams from the Big 12 is going to make the playoffs. They got two losses. All of them have two losses.
Yep.
Dominic, we appreciate the call.
No problem. Anytime, Mark.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Anytime, Mark.
All right. I don't know what to say. I could say a lot. Okay. All right. Got some folks that tell me, I need to be harsher. I need to be, a little bit more to bring in, get people off the line, and then other people. Okay. But yeah, one call for everybody all night. So get certain people in here could call up, let us know what's going on. So what games are going to matter this weekend? Texas A&M is playing Tennessee, correct? Oh, come on. Give me the schedule. Nothing on Thursday night. Nothing on. Oh shoot! When you go for the schedule and they bring up last weekend's scores, no. Starting on Thursday, December 10th. Thank you. Nothing to watch on Thursday. Nothing to watch really on Friday, although we've got a Arizona State game, Colorado and Utah. So there's Colorado. That could be Colorado's last game. Well, they're going to play the championship weekend game. Colorado will. So if Colorado wins its next two games, I'm not saying they're going to make the playoffs, but if they can make it through Utah and whoever they are matched up against in the Pac-12 North, which is just a mess, they will have shown me something. At 4-0, to get to 6-0, they should get some love here. They should get some top 10 kind of love if they're able to get through Utah and, let's say, Washington. All right. Arkansas hosting Alabama. Ohio State, Michigan, Georgia, Missouri, Oklahoma, West Virginia. Northwestern takes on Illinois. It would be bad for the Big Ten if Illinois upset Northwestern. The Big Ten does not want Northwestern to lose to Illinois, and it could happen. It's not a gimme. The Big Ten does not need a two-loss Northwestern team showing up at the Big Ten Championship with two consecutive losses at 5-2. Later in the day, we, of course, have that North Carolina-Miami game at 3:30 Eastern, Indiana-Purdue. Big Ten certainly needs Indiana to win as well. Wisconsin-Iowa game means nothing, but two pretty good football teams playing. Wisconsin-Iowa. The winner should be the 2 seed in the Big Ten West and play Indiana. So there's that. There's that Cincinnati-Tulsa game at 4 o'clock on ESPN2. Cincinnati. Interesting. 8-0. Play Tulsa. Play them again. Man, if they would whip Tulsa twice. Tennessee and Vanderbilt rivalry game. Washington-Oregon rivalry game. USC-UCLA. The Bruins have won 3 straight. First time under Chip Kelly. Virginia Tech. Justin Fuente, maybe his last game at Virginia Tech. Probably not because of the buyout. Probably too much money for Virginia Tech to fork over. BYU, nobody cares about them anymore. They're going to try to finish off at 10-1 against San Diego State. And that's pretty much our game. And unfortunately, we've got a postponed game between Texas A&M and Ole Miss. Texas A&M and Ole Miss. And as Aesthetics Hardstyle is telling us, Texas A&M and Indiana would be a great bowl matchup. All right, folks, we appreciate everybody jumping on the line tonight to talk some college football. We'll be back here after the college football playoff rankings are unveiled. So that show's at 7 o'clock. I believe it's from 7 to 8. Maybe we jump on at 8 o'clock right when the show ends. So stay close to those notifications. It would probably be good for us to move up the 9 o'clock show to 8 o'clock. Again, I think the ranking show is from 7 to 8. We jump on here, and that makes me think that the night of the rankings unveil, well, that's going to be on a Sunday. That's going to be on a Sunday anyway. We'll have a big watch party for the rankings unveiling. We'll do that. Yep, we will do that tomorrow night. So again, hit the bell for the notifications. That way you know when we're going live, and it's going to be after the rankings are unveiled tomorrow night, and maybe we'll shoot for 8 o'clock. Terry Handley, Miami Flow, and Bubba Elect, thank you so much for the Super Chat contributions. These shows are possible to keep the lights on, to feed me and others based on your contributions. And also, we would love to get a sponsor. We would love to get a sponsor for all the shows. That is key. It's a combination of your contributions and sponsorships that are going to keep these babies rolling. So thank you so much for that. And I would appreciate any suggestions you have in regards to sponsorships, or if you own a business, if you own a small business, again, Verma Digital. Check these folks out at Verma Digital. I've been on the phone with them and they have set me up a number of ways to succeed in the future. There's 2.6 billion people on Facebook, and Verma Digital, they know Facebook. They know the traffic. They know where to instruct and steer you. They know how to use Google ads and Facebook ads. It's actually Google AdWords, to be technical about it, and Facebook ads to create and generate the eyes in your direction. You want to find eyes online, and Verma Digital knows exactly how to do that for your small business. So please contact them at vermadigital.com, and it's a free consultation. They'll point you in the right direction, get you all set up, and give you some tremendous advice. Then anything past that, 10% off. If you mention Mark, M-A-R-K, mention my name, you get 10% off all services. So again, give it a shot at vermadigital.com. Anything else from the live chat? Uh-oh, Kenny Loggins? What happened to Kenny Loggins tonight? Todd B says, Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, Wisconsin, Iowa, Northwestern are better than any team in the Big Ten except, I guess that's the Big 12, Oklahoma. Something like that. I don't know why that caught my attention. Dependent Fanatic, thank you so much. We'll be back here tomorrow night. Hit that bell for the notifications. We've got Ohio State, Notre Dame, and Oklahoma, and all sorts of good talk coming your way, Florida and others. So keep a lookout for that as well. Right here at Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Good night. Coach of the Year in college football. I'm going to go Chatwell, Allen. Who else is out there? Campbell, Chatwell, Allen are my finalists. Yep. There you go, Sean. Chatwell, Coastal Carolina. He wins it. Tom Allen second. Matt Campbell's third.